Hello, BookTube. A little while ago, Matthew at Mayberry Book Club, I'll leave a link to his channel down below, created a tag involving yours truly. He went through his bookshelves to try to come up with 8 or 10 books that Steve has not read. Based on the premise, on what is given on this channel, which is that I read a lot, and I have for a long time. And he came out with his books, and he described them and talked about them a bit, which is turning out to be the glory of this tag. And it turned out that on his list, I had not read 2. And then Brian at Bookish he was tagged, and he did this tag as well. And on his list, it turned out that I had not read 2. the prize here is the not reds, not the reds. And since then, quite a few people have done this tag, and I am trying now to do them, to respond to all of them, including a video response to Matthew's original video, which I haven't done. I left just a comment on his video before I realized how much fun this was. And now everybody gets a video response, including him. I will get to him. But Samuel Darham, BookTube's resident playwright, did a response in which the magic number went up to 3. And he was therefore the king of the hill. he was the reigning champion. And then Hannah at Hannah's Books did a response to this tag and got the number all the way up to 4. 4 books that I hadn't read, including one by her. One co-written by her. But I guess it's extra points. I'm kind of surprised. I think that Brian at Bookish has written a book, but he didn't include his in his own. But one way or another, as of today, Hannah at Hannah's Books still reigns as champion of the Has Steve Read It tag. But we have another entrant in the ring. James Holder enters the corrida to try his luck at the Has Steve Read It tag, and this is my James Holder edition of response to that tag. And it's a perilous thing under any circumstances, but James Holder has 2 things going against him. The first is that he's very young. The chances that a young person has read something that I have not are, commensurately slim. And on top of all that, oh goodness. On top of all that, he has also chosen science fiction and fantasy, which is I know that I talk a lot about nonfiction on this channel, and I know that I make fun of the made up stories quite a bit. But science fiction and fantasy and I go way back. It is a favorite sweet tooth genre of mine. I read an enormous amount of it. So he has those 2 things going against him. Let's go through his answers and see how he fares, shall we? So his first pick is a yes, and that is Third Class Superhero by Charles Yu. And when he was describing it on his channel, you couldn't miss the ambivalence, and I felt the same way. It's a short story collection, and short story collections are uneven anyway. But this thing reaped hosannas of praise that it did not deserve. In the whole length of it, there are only a couple of stories that do what stories are supposed to. Stories are supposed to fix a world and a moment in your mind and make you remember it forever. And most of the stories in this collection most certainly do not do that. James Holder actually mentioned one of the most effective ones in the collection. I thought it was one of the best ones. But this is a yes, but it's not enthusiastic. Then we move on to something that is enthusiastic. The next one is also a yes. It's Dark Mondays by Kage Baker, who is the author of a series of books involving the company. The basic premise of which, at the very beginning of all of those books, these go back a while now, is an institution called the Company that sends enhanced operatives backwards in time to save things from the degradations of time. So a famous example would be you at your institute, you at the Company, the date of the destruction of the Great Library at Alexandria, so you send agents there ahead of time to copy all of the books, and you have them. Now you don't want to muck around with the time stream, so you don't make those copies available, but at least they're not lost to the currents of time. And the books have gone on from there. The Company novels are fantastic. In fact, the Company novels are so good that, this is not the only example on this list, the Company novels are so good that I will read anything by the author. So I have in fact read Dark Mondays. Then we move on to number 3, and number 3 is by Tanith Lee. It's Death's Master, which is another book in the Tales of the Flat Earth series by an author who typically does not please me. Tanith Lee typically does not please me, but this book, the Tales of, I think this is the second one in the Tales of the Flat Earth. These are amazing, just amazing, whimsical, often oddly funny, high fantasy, just wonderful, wonderful high fantasy. You could take these things aside from the generally elevated level of rhetoric that we take for granted in the 21st century, but that didn't exist in the in the 20s. In 1919, the level of rhetoric did not exist. In 1919, high fantasy stories written for an adult audience would have embarrassed that adult audience to read. They would have read them anyway because they were a lot of fun, but they weren't literary in the horrible sense of the ambiguous sense of that word. They weren't well done professionally, and these are. So I not only have I read Death's Master, but I highly recommend it. And the same thing with the next book. The next book may be the best written book on this list. This is also a yes. This is a Sorcerer of the Wildeeps by Kai Asante Wilson. And I think, judging from James's response on his video, I may have liked it more than he did. I thought it was terrific, just absolutely terrific. Everything you want a fantasy novel to be, including eloquent. There were large stretches that were extremely well written, and I know that sounds like a given, but in genre fiction, I don't expect that, and I don't often get that. So I always note it when I do. Then the next one is also a yes. This is a thing that we've seen on this channel, I believe. It's Radiance by Catherynne Valente, and it's, I forget the exact something punk distinction for its sub genre. There's hope punk and steampunk and dark punk and blood punk and all this other stuff. I don't remember which one of those it is, but it is an alternate historical fantasy that takes as a reality the, for instance, 1919 view of Earth's solar system. Up until just comparatively an eye blink of time ago, the leading astronomers on Earth believed that all the planets in the solar system were inhabited by humanoid societies, and those humanoid societies could be exotic or strange or have new and odd ways, but that they were all there. That there were people on Neptune, there were people on Pluto, there were people on Mars and Venus, of course, many peoples. When Edgar Rice Burroughs wrote A Princess of Mars, he was tapping into the zeitgeist. He wasn't doing as much whole cloth invention as people blessed with living in the age of space exploration might think. And Radiance is it's a little, for my money, it was a little too twee for its own good, but at its most antic moments, when it's elaborating on that kind of an alternate solar system, it's just wonderful. Then the next one is also a yes. This is Magic for Liars, by Sarah Gailey, who did American Hippo, that came up on Brian at Bookish's Has Steve Read It edition. And Magic for Liars I didn't really like. I mean, this is another example, like I mentioned earlier with Kage Baker, where I will read anything this author writes. But it's, in this case, decidedly hit or miss. And Magic for Liars, I got the distinct impression that James Holder didn't particularly like it, and that he was trying to be nice, and I didn't like it either, and no one expects me to be nice. I thought it was dumb and boring. And then the next one is a no. The next one is The Bloodprint by Ausma Zehanat Khan, which is book 1 in the Khorasan archives. And it's comparatively recent. I'm almost positive that at some point or other I got it. One of you could probably tell me. Did I haul this book? I'm pretty sure that I did. I wish I could put pictures in my description feed. I wish that YouTube were improving in that way instead of cracking down on the creativity of its moneymakers. But I haven't, the Bloodprint I haven't read. It looks like something that I would enjoy. It looks highly detailed and elaborate and very adult, and I like that in my fantasy. And if it's the start of a new ongoing series, then I probably should get it and read it. Then the next one is a yes, and we saw this, I'm pretty sure we saw this on this channel. This is The Traitor God by Cameron Johnston. And like many of the books on this list, and like a whole lot of current fantasy, it involves gods fraternizing with humans. That was a motif that barely existed at all 30 years ago in high fantasy. So I'm kind of naturally wondering what sociological factors are involved in making this suddenly a thing that happens everywhere. A thing that it happens in, I think, 4 of the books just on this list. And you could, if you dip a saucer into the stream of current fantasy novels, I mean, 2019, 2018, surely 2020, you'll pull up a whole bunch of books in which there are dying gods, fraternizing gods, warring gods that humans have direct personal contact with, like they do in Greek or Norse mythology. A part of me wants to make a guess at why that particular motif is rising so strongly in science fiction circles, and the guess would be obvious. I'm not a great sociological prognosticator. The guess would be that it goes hand in hand with the widespread decline of organized religion. That would seem to be obvious to me. I don't know one way or another, though. The Traitor God was really good, and I learned on James Holder's channel that the sequel is coming out this month. Did not know that. Hope I get it. I think I got Traitor God in the mail, so I'm hoping that I get the sequel in the mail because I like the first one. Then the next one is a no, and it's incredibly intriguing. So again, like with the Bloodprint, it's a no that makes me want to go and get the book, which I've noticed is happening on these great bear poking tags about finding out what you have that Steve hasn't read. In almost all cases, where someone makes a response video and holds up a book that I haven't read, I want to read it. And I have to think that part of that is because this tag is making people extra enthusiastic. They're holding up books that they get to talk about that they never get to mention to anybody else, and that comes through in their discussion of the book, which automatically makes me want to read it. That happened on Hannah's tag over and over again for me, and it happened with this one too. The 11th Son is by Gu Long. It's a Chinese fantasy novel translated into English, and I've never heard of it before. I've never heard of the author before, but I loved James's description, and it sounds intriguing. I would like to make it. I would like to turn it from a no to a yes. And then the last one is a yes. And it's something we've seen on this channel. I know we have. Probably seen it twice, the advanced copy and the finished copy. And it's The Last Son by K.D. Edwards, which I thought was terrific. Absolutely terrific. I absolutely loved it. But uncannily, it sounds like I had the exact same kind of reaction to it that James Holder did, as he describes in his video, where you love the book. And I think what it would both mean is love the world of the book, love living in the book, in the world of the book, but you're also incredibly irritated by so many of the choices that the author makes and that the characters make in the course of this one book. James couldn't hide his irritation, and neither can I. I felt the same way when he said, I love it, but I also hate it. I love it, but it also irritates me. I understood perfectly what he's saying. I had the exact same reaction to this book. I read it twice, just because my own reactions to it confused me so much. And I don't know if I still have it. This is another example where I learned from James's video that there's a sequel coming out. Did not know that. Want to read it. I want to see if, for instance, I have the same, thing stuck in your tooth reaction that I had to the first one. I'll have to keep an eye out for it, and I'll have to look around here for The Lost Son. The Last Son could very well be, I'm trying not to think about it, but if you look over my shoulder, you will see the massive piles of the darkest depths of Mordor. Massive piles. Those front columns go 3 deep and are stacked all the way to the bottom of the shelf in the middle there. And the shelf, and the middle shelf is stacked 3 deep. And then you've got the top shelf, and it is also stacked 3 deep. So the Last Son by K.D. Edwards could easily be in there. In fact, that's almost certainly where it would be, because if it isn't there, then I'd be able to see it. I'm that close to having my book collection under control. I'm that close to doing it. If I sit in this chair, this 200-year-old easy chair from Ireland, and I look around this room, I can see all of the books, except those. Those are double and triple stacked, piled in no particular order, utterly unusable, right? Obviously, they're utterly unusable. The books that are that are against the wall in Mordor, I can't even get to, much less pull off and read. But that's the only place left. It used to be that everything in this room was that way. It's a mark of progress. But anyway, it could be in there. So I will maybe at the end of the year give it a look. If not, if I get the sequel from the publicist, I will meekly ask for a copy of the first one again. But anyway, that was James Holder's tag, and it was fascinating, as all of these are. Not in the sense of a friend of mine who watches all the booktube drama. She's just fascinated by all of this world that I have entered. Wouldn't dream of participating in it in any way, but loves to watch it and to comment on it. And she said, well, aren't people going to worry that they're going to hold up? I mean, if they're picking books they don't think you've read, surely some of those books are going to be personal to them. That's going to be why they haven't mentioned them on BookTube. Aren't they worried that you'll crap all over those books? And I've certainly seen that observation has been true. Quite a few people have held up for their response tags books that had personal reactions to them, or that were in fact inherently personal, that they helped to write, for Pete's sake. And I view it as a mark of the trust that we have here in our weird little corner of BookTube. We all like each other, we're all friends, and even when we vigorously disagree, there's no attack. It hasn't happened yet that I have crapped all over a book that somebody held up and said, "This meant so much to me." Did it really? Incoming fire. No, that hasn't happened yet. But even if it did, we know where we stand with each other, right? You are not diminished in any way, nor are your aesthetic choices lessened by having someone that you like, a friend of yours, go full Monty on them. Go full Monty on those choices. Say, "Oh, that's absolute crap." Happens all the time. You do it to me, I do it to you. But the thing that I love is that we're seeing books that get those reactions in people, instead of maybe the more mainstream fare that we usually look at. That's why I guess this is my long roundabout way of saying I'm happy to keep, if this tag keeps going, because I am seeing corners of your book collections that I don't usually see, and that is wonderful. But if you're keeping score at home, you will notice that although I loved James' choices, and I loved hearing him talk about them, only 2 of the books on this list were no's. Only 2. We're back to Matthew at Mayberry Book Club and Brian at Bookish both had 2. Then Samuel Darren upped the game to 3. Then Hannah at Hannah's Books blew him out of the water, scornfully, and got the number up to 4. We're now back down to 2. So, the populist surge, the movement down on the streets to topple the dictator, has not succeeded. In fact, it's been rocked back a step. And Hannah at Hannah's Books is still the reigning champion at 4. So, what will happen tomorrow? Will we have somebody better? I have plenty more responses to make, so we shall see. This is enormous fun, so I will keep doing it. And I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.